So we very much definitely still had a mountain to climb. In 2018-19, we reckoned, well, we knew we had 2,250 published lists, some of which, of course, probably shouldn't have been there, were probably for modules that had ceased to run some time ago. Conversely, not every module had a reading list that should have one. We thought we were on about 80%. It was surprisingly difficult, actually, just to get meaningful stats out of the student record system about how many modules are actually running with students on them this semester. It shouldn't be difficult, but it sometimes is. And although 80% might look quite good for coverage, we reckoned that only about 20% of those lists had been updated by an academic in the last 12 months. A few others had been updated by library staff working in conjunction with an academic who'd said, oh, can you put this on and take this off? Lots and lots, obviously, therefore, hadn't been updated at all, in some cases for many years. You know, we had lists that had been on for 5 years, 7 years, completely unchanged. And in terms of different faculties, the most Aspire active faculty was mine, Humanities and Social Sciences, but even they were only updating 33% of the lists for modules that were running that year. So a third was as good as it got. Technology, design and environment, it was 5%. So that was really not great, and we were still kind of pushing and thinking, what are we going to do to get this to improve? And then, of course, this happened. As we all know, physical libraries got closed, everybody got sent home, academics suddenly found themselves trying to teach online with very little notice. Some of my students had literally gone home without even emptying their rooms because they thought they were going to be back in a week or two and had left all their books in their rooms. And we were all sitting, I'm sure you were too, at our kitchen tables with our laptops, frantically fielding emails. I need this online, can you get this as an ebook? Help, how am I going to finish my dissertation? So we were all doing that. And as the previous presenters from the University of East Anglia also mentioned, that drove a lot of focus to obviously getting material online, but also suddenly a lot of focus to Aspire. Suddenly it was the easiest way, and it was obvious why we needed that three-way communication between the academics and the librarians and the students as to what was going on and where to get things. And so what we found happened during that sort of year, kind of through the end of 2020, was that usage by students went up about 48%. If you look at those sort of column graphs, the two columns on the left are the number of users, so that didn't change drastically, but the number of sessions shot up by nearly 50% between 2019 and 2020. Updating the Aspire lists by academics went up 75%, so it nearly doubled. And obviously a large part of that was because lots and lots of reading lists had to be completely redesigned. There was a real sudden emphasis on what is the essential reading and is it available online. Brookes University came up with some guidance for the 2020-21 academic year when everything still had to be capable of being taught online for kind of enabling digital teaching. And one of the things that we managed to get in there was a very, very strong recommendation that if you were making something essential reading or viewing or listening, it had to be available online. And we got some pushback from that initially. I think some academics in the summer of 2020 were still sort of thinking, oh, this will all be sorted out by the autumn. It'll be fine. We'll be back to normal. And then by kind of November time, when we were falling back into lockdowns again, we had people saying, actually, I hated it, but you were right. I'm so glad, my students can now pass my module without having to go into the library. So there was that huge shift to online resources and to us saying, we can only realistically support you, lecturers, if you've put your stuff in Aspire. We can easily get reports out of Aspire telling us what's essential, what we've got, what we haven't. If you've buried PDFs in the VLE or just book recommendations in the VLE, it's really hard for us to dig those out, to find them, to report on them. If you want us to support you, you've got to be using Aspire. So we had this vastly increased activity level, both by students and by academics. Hooray. What we were then kind of concerned about as we went into sort of 2021-22 was that we did not want that huge increase to be a spike. We didn't want it to come straight down again and end up looking like the image on the left of the Matterhorn. And no, disclaimer, I may have climbed a lot of the things in the Lake District. I have not climbed the Matterhorn. Alpinism is way out of my league. We were looking for something more like a plateau. We were hoping that that increased engagement, those increased numbers, were going to then, either level off or gently keep going up. Much more like that lovely ridge in the Lake District. That's Robinson above Derwentwater, not Derwentwater, Buttermere, for those that know it. But how are we going to do that? We needed to kind of seize the moment. We wanted to convince our academic staff that increased usage of Aspire that some of them were doing needed to become part of their new normal, dreaded phrase that was going round at the time. And you may remember there was a lot of discussion about what did the new normal in higher education look like. And we knew there were lots of features of what we'd been doing that students really liked. Students very much seemed, as we sort of started to come back to campus, to want both and. They wanted stuff happening face-to-face, they wanted to be able to get into the libraries, but they also wanted everything available online. They'd got really used to the idea that they could not turn up to lectures if they didn't feel like it and watch the recordings afterwards. They wanted to be able to access everything online and still have the option of going to the library for a print book if they wanted to. And lots of them had really appreciated the increased curation of their reading list. There's a nice quote there from one of the student surveys that we glommed onto in the library and said, fantastic, there's some really nice qualitative evidence from a student. The reading lists have been fantastic this year, really easy to access and simple to use, also really helpful when doing assignments to see right away if it's an ebook or not. So they really liked that. However, and again, this harks back to something else that Robin from UEA mentioned earlier, we were also very aware that our academic staff were feeling burnt out and exhausted by all these both and demands. They'd had to pivot really quickly to doing all their teaching online. That had been a huge amount of work and effort and relearning. Now they were finding that students were expecting them to keep that up and do the face-to-face stuff as well. We were saying, oh, all that extra work you did on your reading list, that was great, can you do that again? And so we had to be really careful how we pitched this. We wanted to make sure that we were presenting Aspire to them as part of the solution rather than another problem. And this went along with something that we had been trying to plug literally for years, to get them to see Aspire and their reading lists not as an annoying admin task that the library went on about, but as part of their pedagogy. Thinking about their reading lists at the same time as they thought about everything else about how they taught their module, how it was organised, what they wanted the students to read or view or listen to, why they wanted them to do that, how they made sure the students knew what they wanted them to do, that it was all part of their teaching. So we really needed to get that message across. And we still had a lot of areas of patchy engagement or even non-engagement to address. So we took multiple approaches, really. Just one thing was obviously not going to work, and I'll sort of talk through now a few of the strands, if you like, the things that we were doing, all of these things simultaneously. First strand is all about evidence. All of those of you who work with academic staff will know that academics love data. And so I should say at this point that at Brookes we don't have Talis Advanced MIS. We can't afford it, basically, we haven't got the budget. So this is very low budget stuff. Everything quantitative that we've done has been done with the core tools that if you have Aspire you already have. The list reports, the review reports, the Google Analytics that you can get set up on your tenancy, and just crunching things in spreadsheets. There is nothing here that involves any tools that anybody using Aspire won't already have to hand. So module reports, list coverage reports, review statistics. The Google Analytics stuff is great, both for kind of overall usage, producing really nice graphs of how many people are using your Aspire lists and when they're using them. For creating top 10 lists, you can see what's been the most clicked on. because a lot of our academics also use the LTI to embed readings in the VLE, we could also get separate Google Analytics numbers for those. And that's quite revealing to compare with your overall list stats and see who is clicking through to the readings that are embedded in the VLE. So that's useful as well. And then for the qualitative side of stuff, just what everybody else has, the NSS data. We do a Brookes satisfaction survey in our undergraduate years 1 and 2, which is basically the NSS questions directed to first and second years, module surveys, course committees, anything where you get kind of student feedback. If they spontaneously mention the reading lists, we grabbed hold of that as well. So that's the kind of evidence that we were collecting. And just to show you what some of it looks like. Anybody who hasn't dug into the kind of reporting possibilities in Aspire, this is one of the ones that I was using to generate all this data. It's just the review reports. You can specify what dates you want to look at reviews between. You can connect them to particular bits of the hierarchy, and so you can easily produce spreadsheets that show you which lists have been reviewed, which haven't, where you've got the gaps. Then there's the Google Analytics, and that's the Pages report, which again is one of my most frequently visited pages. That's going to give me my top 10 lists and my top 10 clicked on embedded pages. And then of course the NSS, as I say, for the qualitative stuff. So even without things like advanced MIS, there are lots of places you can get data. And what we then realised that we needed to do was to kind of tailor how we were presenting and what data we were presenting to different audiences according to which messages we kind of wanted them to take from it. And we did that at a number of levels. So we were going and talking to the university senior management, and the sort of thing we were presenting to them was the kind of big picture stuff, the top level numbers, how many thousand sessions last academic year, how did that compare with the year before, the faculty comparisons in terms of reading list reviews, which faculty is the most active, the least active, and they always want to know how does that compare with sector. So any evidence that we could find for what was going on more broadly from the rest of you, from Insight and other sources like that, we brought in. And what we were hoping to convince them of with all of that is the value of mandating engagement with Aspire. There's been a lot of talk today about sort of different university cultures and how different everywhere is. And in lots of universities, top-down works fine. The senior management can say this will be so, and it's so. Some places that absolutely doesn't work at all, and you have to work completely from the bottom up. Brookes is, I think, very much a mixture of both. You have to actually get buy-in on the ground to make things happen, but sometimes things will only happen in the sort of recalcitrant areas with a bit of an extra push and actual mandate. You have to be able to say, no, this isn't optional. The university has said this is a thing. It has got to happen. It had actually been university policy for a number of years that Aspire was the only place a reading list should be, and there shouldn't be a random Word document sitting in Moodle or whatever. But like a lot of university policies, in some areas this was more honoured in the breach than it was in the observance. Where I can think of numerous lecturers who would assure their academic liaison, no, I don't have a reading list. And then we went and looked at their Moodle course, and there were illicit PDFs and dodgy scans and things scattered all over it. Said, you do actually. You have reading all over your module. You just haven't chosen to put it in a reading list. So we did want to get them the engagement properly mandated. But we also very much needed to work at the kind of middle and the ground level. So we were also going and talking to kind of associate deans in the faculties, who are the people kind of heading up the teaching and learning governance in each faculty, and the programme leads. And they again are interested in the faculty leads want to know the kind of inter-faculty, how does my faculty match up compared to everybody else's, but they also want to see within the faculty, well, which programmes have you got good engagement, where have you got less so, When you get down to the programme leads, they want individuals. They want, well, which modules is it, which isn't it, whose door have I got to go and knock on, or who do I have to send an email to kind of say, hey, what's, is there something else you need here? Why is this not there? And I think what we were trying to do at that level was to really create a culture of expectation around Aspire engagement. As I think prior to the pandemic, we'd sort of got to the point where most people knew in theory it was the policy and it was the thing they were supposed to do. But there were a lot of things the university said they were supposed to do, and some of them they did and some of them they didn't. And I think this is one of these things that culturally varied across and even within faculties as to whether people thought it was a real thing that they actually did or just one of those things that they paid lip service to. So what we really wanted to get was a kind of a culture that, yes, there will be a reading list, and it will be a good reading list, and it will be well curated, and the students will engage with it and want to look at it. And in order to get that, we were also going down to try and support and inspire and enthuse individual lecturers. And they always want to see their own numbers. Is anybody clicking on my reading list? And if not, why not? And they're always, again, very keen to see good practice examples, particularly from within their own subject area. If they have a colleague who's done something really, completely revamped a reading list and made it much more engaging, probably much shorter, but not necessarily, good student notes, well structured, and if you can then show them that that's bringing the students in, that's really driven up the engagement with that list, they get really interested. And of course, the most important thing is their own student feedback. If the students are telling them that they can't find the reading list, or it's not easy to use, or, well, yeah, they knew the reading list was there, but they didn't actually do the reading, then that gives the lecturer a motivation and a reason to engage with Aspire. So what we're trying to do at the individual level is to inspire them and encourage them. We don't want to be waving a big stick if we can avoid it. We want them to feel genuinely enthused. And one of my kind of poster people for this is a lovely academic in the School of Education with whom I'd done a lot of work prior to the pandemic around revamping reading lists, because she felt that her students were not doing the reading. And she piped up completely unprompted in an online faculty meeting where we were talking about Aspire engagement, and she said, I just love doing my Aspire reading list. It's, I really enjoy it. It's just a key part of how I teach the module now. And I sat there typing a note to her in the chat on the side going, thank you, thank you, thank you. Completely unsolicited, she genuinely meant it. So it's people like that, if you can get them on board, that can actually kind of enthuse their colleagues. And what all that will hopefully lead you to, which again, you cannot beat this with academics, is a bit of competition. A bit of healthy rivalry. Why has Dr. So-and-so's list got so many more clicks than mine? What are they doing right? Or for associate deans, why are humanities and social sciences doing it and my faculty aren't? Whatever it is, get them motivated. And in the service of that, the thing that we have found really, really effective is this use of Google Analytics to produce the kind of, the top 10, the top of the pops, basically. Every week during semester, I do a top 10. It's just a spreadsheet, culled from Google Analytics, which have been the most popular lists, the top 10 lists this week, which have been the top 10 most popular pages, which nearly always turn out to be list sections that are embedded in our VLE. Those get more clicks overall than the whole lists. And then at the end of the semester and the end of the academic year, you can do it again. You can do a top 100, you can do top 10s for individual faculties if they want to know them. You can tailor all of that. Just depends how much time you have to mess about with an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheet, really. But I have no special data wrangling expertise. I just, I know my way around a spreadsheet and that's it. And you can do all of that by pulling your data out of Google Analytics into a spreadsheet. And individual academic liaison librarians, to whom I always send the weekly top 10, will then jump on that, and they will tell one of their lecturers, your list was the most viewed list in the university this week, or you're in the top 10, you've been in the top 10 for the last 6 weeks. And that really motivates them, actually. It's surprising. You would think they would be above such things, but absolutely not. I guess like all of us, they are working their socks off. They might have put a lot of effort into revamping that reading list. And I guess a lot of us often, we put a lot of effort into something and we send it out there and you think, is anybody actually looking at it? Is it making any difference? And so being able to show academics that their engagement has gone through the roof, is a really positive thing. I do always then have to say to them, I cannot promise you they are actually reading, but they have clicked. They have clicked through and looked at the reading. And then obviously the kind of final piece of that puzzle only the academic can tell, which is when it comes to looking at assignments and looking at the work the students have done, have they really actually engaged with the reading? And then they sometimes feed that back to us. But one of the things that certain academics have fed back to me they've been really pleased to see is when they've looked at their stats across a whole semester and they've seen that actually, the reading, the engagement with the reading has continued all through the semester. They expect it to spike at the beginning, but they often kind of expect it to sort of then just do that. And they've been really pleased if there's been high engagement right across the semester with the reading. So, it is surprisingly motivating to be able to show people those numbers and show them what's happening. And it doesn't involve a huge amount of technical skill, as I say. Google Analytics and a spreadsheet will get you there. And then the third and final sort of prong of our approach, that's just a bit more from the spread. That's a spreadsheet to show you the sort of thing that gets generated from the Google Analytics. So that's literally just the top 10, one of the weekly spreadsheets that gets sent out. And then the final prong of the part of the approach is the support, because obviously we were asking a lot of academics. They were already very overloaded and busy, and the sort of quid pro quo, if we were going to be a lot more insistent about Aspire lists both being mandatory and being updated and reviewed, was that we had to make sure that all the support we were offering was really accessible and was available in different ways. We already had a full suite of kind of mini print guides. People could dive in and just pick a guide to bookmarking a video or updating an existing reading list. In summer 2022, we created video versions of all of those as well, because not everybody likes text. Some people would much prefer to be shown, okay, it looks like this, and then you do this, and then you do this. But we were still getting feedback from academic staff saying, where do I find all these guides you're always telling me about? And we told them over and over again in numerous emails, but we decided they were sitting in our institutional repository, but we decided they needed to be more obvious. So we did two things. The first one was a bit meta. We made a reading list of all the guides on how to do reading lists. And in a bid to make it as searchable as possible, we called it How to Use Talis Aspire, Guides and Help for Academic Staff. So people can go to the reading list search, and it doesn't matter if they put in how to use Aspire, how to use Talis, Aspire Help, Aspire Guides, they will find that list. And it bookmarks and brings together all of the little print mini guides and all of the videos, and it structures it as a page which hopefully will help them to understand which bits they should be looking at when. But we also made it easier for people to self-teach by putting them all on a Moodle course in our VLE. We had a very old and very out-of-date Moodle course on Aspire, which was so out of date that we've been hiding it. So we brought that back to life. We completely revamped it, and again presented all of those guides in a way that would mean that people could work through a kind of self-teaching course. All of the Aspire training at Brookes is done by the academic liaison librarians, and it's always one of the first things that we offer to a new member of academic staff, a new lecturer. If they're going to be leading a module and therefore responsible for a reading list, it's one of the things that we put in. We will always give people, face-to-face, either physical or face-to-face online, one-to-one training if they want it. But some people are very keen self-teachers. They will sort of say, just quickly set me up, show me the basics, and then point me at the documentation and I'll figure it out for myself. Lots of people want something to refer back to. Robin from UEA referenced that absolutely typical situation where somebody does their Aspire list once a year, they come back in the summer and go, how does this work again? I can't remember. They get so far, I'm stuck, or something's changed. So having things that people can go back to and remind themselves is always super useful. And so we've now got the Moodle course and the Aspire list of guides, which it's really easy to point people to. alongside the kind of full individual support and training. We will also do workshops if people are having kind of, course development days in the summer, or they want us to come and do an Aspire workshop. Robin also talked about the importance of getting hold of new academics, and another of the developments that came out of our sort of advocacy at university level and the University Teaching and Learning Committee saying, well, how else can we support academic staff to do this, was to get a reading list workshop embedded in the course for new lecturers. We have a course called Explore. And I was asked to do that and specifically kind of instructed to make it not a nuts and bolts of how to use Aspire, but given the nature of that how to teach course, much more about the pedagogy. So that was a good and an interesting challenge for me. I had to dig a bit more into the literature and the research to back up why is this important, how are you going to kind of constructively align your reading list with your teaching. I was helped in that by a really, really nice guide which we have at Brookes, and I kind of feel able to plug how brilliant it is because I didn't write it. One of my previous academic liaison librarians wrote a brilliant guide a number of years ago called What is a Reading List For?, which is one of the first things that we've always sent to new academics. And actually that doesn't mention Aspire at any point all the way through. It's talking purely about the kind of principles and theory of how to construct a good reading list, how to think about the teaching of your module, how to engage the students with the reading. And it draws on research about reading lists and students' views of them. One of the really nice things for us was last year when Sam Sharman and Matt East's research came out. They did that little study. Sam surveyed students from all around the world, not just Aspire users, on what made for a good reading list from a student's point of view. And basically everything they said, the structure, the annotation, the prioritisation, was all stuff that we were already recommending in our good practice guide. So that was lovely because that was student validation and kind of external research saying, yep, that is the right approach. So being able to say to the academic staff, this is what we've always recommended, and here is the research saying that yes, this is a good approach to take, was really helpful. So all of that support is there now for the academic staff who want to draw on it. It was always there, but it wasn't as visible as we've hopefully now made it. So, how far have we got in terms of the numbers? Well, top down bit first, we have been working with the University Teaching and Learning Enhancement Committee, the TLEC, and we got their agreement that module documentation absolutely mandates the use of Aspire for reading lists. We went to that committee, with reports on Aspire engagement, and the Associate Dean said, well, why are they not already doing this? And we said, you tell us, they're your stuff. And so they've made the review of the reading list an integral part of the annual module updating. It's now there in the kind of tick box list. One of the things that you have to do is say, yes, I have looked at the reading list. At a bare minimum, if I haven't changed it, I have sent it for review again. So the library knows I have looked at it and not changed it. We presented that again to them as this will save you time because you will not be fielding emails from your academic liaison librarian nagging you saying, you haven't looked at your list. If you've looked at it and you don't want to change it, that's fine, just send it for review anyway. We can see that you haven't changed it, and it's 2 clicks for us to go, yeah, okay. And we then came down to the individual programme level. The programme lead said, well, we're quite happy to push on this, but we need to know, we haven't got time to go through all of the modules in our programmes and see who's got their reading list and who's updated it and who hasn't. And we said, okay, fine, we will do that bit. We will do an audit for you, and we will, in areas where we knew that there were gaps, we said we will provide you with the data, we will show you who has and who hasn't updated their reading lists, and then we'll let you work on that. Because what the individual lecturers were saying to us as well, if my programme lead tells me something's non-negotiable and I've really got to do it, then I'll do it. So we said to the programme leads, we need you to help us with this, and they said, we'll help you if you give us the data. So that was the kind of top-down part. All right, and we said that we would go back and report to the Teaching and Learning Committee annually on what's happened to the academic engagement numbers. So in terms of what's happening on the ground, reading list coverage has gone up from about 80% of modules in 2019 to, we reckon, 94% in 2022. So that's very, very nearly there. We're pretty pleased with that. And the percentage of reading lists being updated by academics has gone up. It's still not ideal, but it's gone up from 20% in 2019 to 36%. So progress in the right direction. And the number of individual list reviews has gone up more than 3 times. And you think, how does that square with the previous bullet point? What it means is that some lists are being reviewed numerous times in the same year. Some academics, have got so into updating their Aspire list that they now just do it a week or 2 at a time, sort of a week ahead of where they're teaching. So there are some lists being reviewed almost weekly during the semester because they're just publishing the odd change. So there's a lot more activity, but it's still not across the board. It's still a little bit variable. So there is always more to do, and obviously, we will keep climbing the mountain, and hopefully there will be another summit a little bit further on. That is everything that I wanted to say. I am very willing to take any questions or observations or counter-narratives from anybody who's tried anything similar. That didn't work at all. Over to you. Ooh, here comes the big scary dice. I can hear you fine.
I'll bring it.
So I'll give you a chance to swig some water anyway.
Thank you. You mentioned peer promotion and a bit of competition amongst academics to try and encourage them to engage with the lists and update them. Have you thought about or tried to harness the student voice as well to encourage them to do that?
A little bit in terms of, I mentioned the sort of student feedback. So, when students have said, either in the NSS or a module review or whatever, if they've particularly talked about positive features of reading lists, then we have used that. And certainly when the university was kind of surveying students about their experience of the sort of lockdown year, we had a number of students saying, the reading list absolutely saved me. I needed that. I needed the online links. I needed to know what was essential. So we very much kind of pushed that. It can be a little bit difficult where you have the more sort of the other side of the coin, the more negative feedback, because of course what we don't want to do is enable lecturers to identify individual students who have said this reading list is rubbish and I don't like it. So you have to be a little bit cautious, I think, about doing it the other way around. We haven't done anything more sort of global, I think perhaps partly because students already say that they're surveyed to death and we don't necessarily want to do a great what do you think of your reading list survey? But it's definitely an area that we could explore more, because you're quite right, what academics really care about ultimately is what their students think rather than what the library bangs on about. I suppose in a way we're using the user numbers and the clicks as a kind of proxy for that if we can show you your students have engaged more than they did last year before you revamped the list, that is in itself a kind of endorsement in that they're actually going to the list more now and they're clicking through and they're using the resources.
And do your students ever make any use of the additional functionality like intention to read and reading intentions? Is that ever introduced to them, or do they make any use of that?
Yes, yeah, it is. Individual academic liaison librarians, some plug it more than others. But yes, we've not kind of collected that data systematically, and again, that could be something that we could do. To say this many students have set intentions, or this many have put notes on. I would like to make more use of the dashboard, to promote that, the kind of analytics that's within the list, and promote that to academics. And the main drawback with doing that so far for us has always been the fact that, as I understand it still, those analytics don't count the clicks on an electronic resource link of your online link, which is how most of our students would be engaging with most of the resources. So if that ever gets incorporated into what's counted in the list analytics, we'll be able to make a lot more use of that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll give it a go.
visions of somebody tumbling over the seats there. Don't want to be responsible for a death on my watch.
I think we're all right. So it's really interesting hearing about incorporating reading lists into pedagogy. So one of the things that we get pushback on a lot is academics saying, reading lists are spoon feeding, we just want to give students, like, these are the things we want you to go and look up, and we want you to go away and engage with the library and, find these things yourself. I think everyone's kind of had that feedback at some point. I was just wondering, how have you dealt with that when you've come across it?
We've definitely come across it. I think we came across that more sort of a few years ago when we were first introducing Aspire. And I think I probably slightly surprised academics when I had those conversations with them by pushing back a bit and saying, it is not the library's job to make it hard for students to find stuff. We are into making it as easy as possible for them to locate the specific things you have told them they should read. If you want them to read beyond the reading list and develop searching and evaluative skills, and for them to decide beyond the reading list which are appropriate resources for them to read, absolutely do that. In that case, have a much shorter reading list and build it into the requirements for your assignment that they read beyond it. And one of the conversations we often have is there's no single thing a reading list should be, and a third-year module reading list might look very different from a first-year one, for example. I don't know, are you familiar with any of Tara Brabazon's work, the University of Google and those? One of the things that she talks about a lot is kind of scaffolding, helping students to find appropriate information sources. And she's very into the idea that in the first year you should spoon-feed them almost everything and tell them these are academic resources and these are not. And by the third year you should have helped them to build skills so that they can do much more exploration. I wouldn't say that it's as simplistic as that, but I think you can have conversations with academics about what do you actually want students to do. The reading lists, I tend to suggest to them, is about, are they going to turn up to your seminar having read the stuff that they had to read in order to participate in the seminar? If you want them to read beyond that, by all means, either have an additional reading section, or if you want them to do their own exploration, make that a component of the assignment. So we've had those quite in-depth conversations, and I think often academics have just had that as an assumption that they've had for 20 years. Because they had to rummage around in print indexes or card catalogues or get dusty on the shelves. They think that's, it's a bit like consultants supposedly all kind of ratting on junior doctors and saying, well, I used to work a 56-hour week and it never did me any harm. Just because things were difficult for them, it doesn't mean it's our job to make things difficult for the students of today. And if we want them to think about the resources, they have to be able to find them. If they're spending time finding the resources, they're not going to be spending time thinking about what's in the resources. So I can talk about that with people all day, and they usually end up looking slightly glazed and backing away and wishing they hadn't started the conversation. But you're absolutely right. It's a good and a fundamental conversation to have, I think, about what is a reading list for. Thank you. So close. Hi.
Just? Yes. Thank you, first of all. Thank you for the work you've done and the presentation you gave today. It was great. I'm Kate, and it's my first day as the new Talis Aspire product manager.
Wow.
So I'm very much looking forward to getting more input. We've had a couple of really good conversations today, which give me tons of questions about some of your slides.
Okay.
So if I just try to keep it to 2 today. The first one was a follow-on on the competition driven from the Google Analytics that you share with the top reading lists, which lecturer gets how many, whatever. Have you noticed that they use it to compete with themselves as well as each other? Do they use it to improve their lists? You showed a lot of updating of lists, but is there a correlation there, do you think? Do you have any feel?
I think that it is sometimes, I think it has led to conversations with their academic liaison librarian. I think it's often, because we tend to do top 10s, we don't do bottom 10s. We don't do sort of, no one's looked at your list. So in a sense, we're trying to provide sort of carrot rather than stick. It's often vindication for people who have done the work,
Positive.
rather than, you know, a sort of, oh, well, your list is rubbish, so no one is looking at it. By implication, if your list never appears, you know, sort of anywhere near the top 10, maybe you might want to think about it. But of course, you know, modules have vastly differing numbers of students on them as well. People running fairly small modules in the humanities complain that, well, it's not fair, you know, business have got 250 students on that module, of course they're going to get more clicks. So, yeah, numbers are crude, you know, but sometimes you can just use them to get people's attention.
And my second question, could you go back to your slide with the Moodle training? If that's how you want to word it.
I hope I can. Let's find out. Oh, clicky, 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 click. Excuse me.
Easier for me to remember when I'm looking at the slide.
Yeah, sure.
This
There we
one,
are.
yeah. So this looks really nice how you've created this, but I'm wondering if, I noticed the order. You have bookmarking before creating the reading lists.
Yeah.
And just based on some other conversations I had earlier, I'm just wondering if there's any correlation to you needing to create this in how it's presented initially.
Mm-hmm. I think, yes, there is, and it's partly to do with something that Robin touched on earlier about the quick add tool from within the list, and how at the moment that doesn't always lead to academics bookmarking the most appropriate version of something.
Oh.
So at the moment we have tended to try to train them to bookmark stuff first by going to, you know, our library, catalogue our databases and so on, and then creating or updating their list, because if they use the quick add tool, they don't find the right stuff. They don't find journal articles at all because at the moment they're not there. And with our quick add tool, because we're using OCLC WorldCat, you can guarantee that even if we do have a particular book, they will glom onto an edition that we don't have. And we will be tinkering about and fixing it.
Thank you.
So it would be lovely to be able to do it another way round. We need Aspire to work slightly differently for us before we do that.
And can we have more conversations with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Everybody at Talis knows my details. They'll stick you onto me.
Anybody else? Scott?
Right. Okay, I am going to have to run very shortly because I have a train to catch, but thank you very much. I'm amazed
Thank
I have
you.
this many people. I thought everyone would be in the student session, so thank you.